in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone. Uh, I'm sorry for being late. I sent an email for being late actually, but I think I'm not sure whether it has gone through or not. Did you guys got a mail about being late for 30 minutes? Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, Sumanjit, I missed out actually. I didn't added you in my Gmail account, so I couldn't find your ID from it. I'm sorry. Yeah, actually, I normally I added you into the Zubanic account and not into Gmail account. So I couldn't do that for you. Alright. So guys, okay, yesterday I listed down, what I'm gonna do in the today class. Yeah. Okay. I don't think no one received it. Hey, you guys received the recording for the last classes, the servlets. Okay. Yeah, no one received it. It seems. Actually, I wrote an email last day to Shiva, and I think he didn't reply it yet. Right. Yeah. Let me check. Yes. No. So let me call him up and I to ask him to do that. So first is what is this init parameters and what is this context parameters we're going to talk about. Now, when I spoke about the servlet life cycle, when I spoke about the servlet life cycle, there is something called init method and destroy method. When I spoke about the servlet life cycle, then servlet life cycle consists of three methods: init method, service method, and destroy method. The init method, service method, and destroy method. Now we're going to see what is the significance of that init method. We're going to see what is the significance of that init method and how do we use those, what is the significance of the init method. So let me create a project. Dynamic web project. It's parameters demo. Click on the finish. Here we go. I'm creating a servlet. Let it be parameters demo. Then class name is also parameters demo. Let's focus here. I click on the next, and if you observe, there is something called initialization parameter. Initialization parameter. I click on add, then I give a name. Let's say email address is the name of the parameter. Let the value be this. Okay. Then I say click on the next. And I'm going for a init method and do get method. You got it? Yeah. If you see here, what is happening? Web servlet, the URL pattern, and init param. So what is the parameter name? Email address, the value. Now how do we read these values? How do we read these values? How do we read these values in the do get method? So what happens is, the init method is taking a servlet config, right? Yeah. There are a lot of mechanisms to get the servlet config. Get servlet config. You get a servlet config. Servlet config is an interface. Servlet config is an interface, and you can obtain it using the method by calling the method get servlet config. So servlet config is an interface. Get servlet config will return an object of the implementation class of the interface servlet config. Get servlet config returns an object of implementation class of interface servlet config. Now I need to retry the value. So config dot get init parameter, and what is the parameter? Config dot get init parameter, and here goes the parameter name. Then you can print the parameter name. Response dot get writer dot println email address. Now that's it. Now what you need to do, right click, run as, run on server, click on the next and finish. The servlet name is what? Parameter server. You have a null pointer exception. Let me see what for null pointer exception. 36. So when we say config dot get init parameter, no, I think this config object is a problem. Okay, let me do the other way of using the servlet config. Servlet config is null. Then you got a init method, and in this method I can say config. This is how you obtain the config object. Servlet config is an interface. So when, as you know, that which method gets called, the init method gets called when the servlet object is created. Then init method is invoked. That init method is carrying a parameter. That parameter is assigned to the servlet config variable, and with the help of that servlet config variable, I was able to read the initialization parameters. I'm able to read the initialization parameters. Now in case if you are not using servlet 3.0, then in that case you will have a web.xml, and in the web.xml you will have a servlet tag. Within the servlet tag you will have a servlet name, servlet class, then following that you will have a servlet mapping. Within the servlet mapping you will have a servlet name, then you will have a URL pattern, then the interesting thing is in the servlet tag, after the servlet name and servlet class, you can add one more thing, init param name, param value. This is done. So let's run it, because there is a modification to the XML, so we just need to restart it. Now this initialization parameters are specific to the servlet. These initialization parameters are specific to the servlet. So if you want to pass any initialization parameters specific to a servlet, you pass this way. This is how you pass initialization parameters to a servlet. And initialization parameters are specific to a servlet. That is, the initialization parameters specified to one servlet cannot be accessed by other. If you see, this init param tag is a part of a servlet tag. So it is accessed only to that particular servlet. It's not accessed by other servlets. It cannot be accessed by other servlets. Now there is one more category of parameters. Now the init parameter is specific to a servlet, right? Now I can also specify parameters to the application. So within the application, anyone can access. I mean, any servlet can access. So just put a number there. So mobile number. So what happened? Context param name and a param value. So this is not specific to any servlet. This is specific to the application. So within the application, any servlet can access that. So this is not config parameter. But with the help of config, you can call context. With the help of config, you can get context, and with the help of context, you can get that init parameter. What is the parameter name? The context parameter name is mobile number. Then I can just print it. Parameters demo. Now here, servlet name. So what did I demonstrate here? The demonstration was about the parameters. There can be initialization parameters, there can be context parameters. Initialization parameters are only specific to the servlet in which they are specified, whereas context parameters is for the entire application. Context parameters is for the entire application. Right. So we demonstrated how do we access init parameters and how do we access the context parameters. Now what next? Let's read about filters first. So I just go to the same tutorial which I referred last day, java2point.com. Filter. Now what is this filter is? It is an object that is invoked at the pre-processing and post-processing of the request. Now I'll tell you the reason for this. Normally I did validations using JavaScript, if you remember. When I click on the submit button of a HTML document, I want the data to be validated. Why I want the data to be validated? I want the data to be validated, the reason being what for it? The reason for that is I don't want to submit the data which is not valid. Then what is the point? You submit a request to the server and you send an invalid data. When you send an invalid data that don't get into the database, then you are making a request to the server which is not going to be fulfilled. And what is the point in submitting those kind of requests and putting a burden on a server? you have 10 fields, and you entered your first name, but you started your first name with a number. Instead of realizing it on the browser itself, you go to the server, and when I'm trying to insert into the database, then I realize that, oh, it's incorrect. Then you send it back to the client. Again, client will rectify the first mistake, and he makes the second mistake. Again you go to the server, again you realize, you come back. So you are hitting the server again and again, that too for what? Incomplete tasks. Right? So you are putting a burden on a server for those tasks, for those requests which will not get fulfilled. So what we want to do is, we want to filter those kind of requests. So one thing is, I discussed JavaScript for you. With the help of JavaScript, you can do the validations on the client side. With the help of JavaScript, one can do the validations on the client side. But look at this. If I go to the tools, I think it is settings. When I go to the settings, and when I go down, there is something called show advanced settings. Now in the show advanced settings, when I click, then there is something called content settings. Now if you observe this content settings, the third option is there was cookies, there was images, there is something called JavaScript. Now what you see on this, allow sites to run JavaScript. And there is something called do not allow any site to run JavaScript. Now if I pick this, will your JavaScript execute? Your JavaScript, actually what I told you, that HTML, CSS, JavaScript, they are all stored in the server, but they get executed on the browser. If somebody is disabling a JavaScript, then your JavaScript is not going to get executed. So if JavaScript is not getting executed, then what happens? You are not validating the data. So without validating the data, you are submitting the data to the server. And this is what causes the problem. So when your data is not validated on the client side using JavaScript, and you reach the servlet, then servlet realizes all the mistakes. And you know that the servlets are multi-threaded. A single servlet serves multiple requests, and you end up in sending multiple requests for invalid data. This is going to add a lot of burden on the server. So what they did is, they introduced a concept called filter. Now before the request reaches the servlet, the request reaches the filter. Before the request reaches the servlet, the request reaches the filter. Now this filter will filter there are a lot of things here. What it can do? It is mainly used to perform filtering tasks such as conversion, logging, compression, encryption, and decryption, input, validations, etc. So it is doing a lot of these kind of stuff. So we're going to do example with validation. So we're going to see how do we create a filter, right? And we have something called, the way we have servlet config, and servlet context. Here also we have filter, filter chain, and filter config. So we're going to use these methods, right? We're going to use these methods, right? So let's see. Let me create a filter first. What I do is, let me create a new project, dynamic web project. I say filter demo. Then I just want to have a login.html, which I will be picking it from the earlier examples. let me create a servlet. Or before servlet, let me create a filter. Or let me create a servlet. I just say login servlet. Then I go with the same logic what I have written in the previous class for login servlet. Got a username, password. I just give a message valid and invalid. Valid user, invalid user. Now, what exactly happens here is, let me run this filter demo. I have not created a filter yet. I'll do that later. Now you got this username, password. This is everything is fine. Now when I keep them empty and I click on the button, still it reaches the servlet. Alright, when I keep it empty and when I click on the button, still it reaches the servlet, and it was expected to throw null pointer exception, but it is consuming the space actually. So you see this is an invalid because, okay, let's do this, right? Where we go, the program. Okay, this is what valid user. Now I keep them empty, both the fields. I click on a button. So it still says invalid user or password, but actually what? It should give me a validation error, right? What should be the validation error? They should not be empty. They should not be empty. So what happened is somebody disabled JavaScript on the browser. On my browser, JavaScript is disabled. So of course it won't be validating the data. It won't be validating the data. Now what we need to do in this case, because there is no JavaScript enabled, so you cannot validate the data using JavaScript. So what they did is they introduced a concept called filter. Filter. Now, what is this? Java. Showing what package they actually belong to. Got a filter chain. You have a filter which package it belongs to Java expert servlet dot Java expert filter dot it says create a filter. Okay, let's try this. Login filter. Click on the next. Okay. URL pattern and this is to be okay. Then click on the next. Yeah. Okay. There is no super class. There is an interface to implement. Here we go. Java.servlet.filter. There is no super class to it. It's an interface. So filter is an interface. So I'm implementing an interface. So as the way you have a servlet got a method init and destroy. It also got a method called for init. You have a constructor. You have a method for destroy. Now this guy says, hey, here you put your code, piece of code. Look at the URL pattern. So you have a URL pattern as what? Login filter. You have a URL pattern as what? Login filter. So I change this URL pattern to servlet1. This is the URL pattern of the servlet. Right? This is the URL pattern of the servlet. Now what happens is the request before reaching the servlet, it reaches the filter. Now here, oh, you also have a init method here. Now what I can do is I can check if string username equal to request dot get parameter username, string password equal to request dot get parameter password. We got a username and we got a password. Then I'm gonna okay, let's do this because it is accepting the spaces. I'll say print. Now I'll say here if username equals to empty or if username dot length, right, if username dot length is equal to 0, right, then I give a message. What is the message you want to give? Okay, let's say boolean. Invalid equal to false. Then I write here invalid equal to true. Similarly, I do it for other one. If password equal to empty or password dot length equal to 0, invalid equal to true. Invalid equal to true. Then you say what? If invalid is true, then I forward the request to the servlet. How? With the help of filter chain. This is a do filter method. It is taking a parameters, request, response, and filter chain. So, okay. Oh, sorry. If it is invalid, I will be redirecting. Or I'll be printing a message. Invalid data. So it won't reach the servlet. If it is valid, then I forward the request to servlet. If the data is invalid, I'll print invalid data. If the data is valid, I'll forward the request to servlet. So this is how your filter will filter the request. Right click, run on server. Then you have a login.html. Then I keep them empty. See, who is processing? Your filter is processing the data. Your filter has printed a message called invalid data. Now if the data is valid, if it is not empty, then the filter will forward it to the servlet, whereas your servlet will print a message valid user. Right? Your servlet will print a message valid user or invalid user. So between your request and the servlet, there is somebody standing called as filter. What happens is, instead of request hitting the servlet, it hits the filter. Now with the help of filter, you can do the validation, or what you can do whatever you want to do with the help of filter. And it's up to you on what you want to delegate the request to the servlet, or you don't want to delegate the request to the servlet, or you want to just go back to the client and say, hey, this is invalid. So you can do whatever you want with the help of the filter. Yeah. Any question on this part? Any question on this filter part, or is it clear? I'm sorry guys, just give me a minute. Hey, I hope you guys can hear me, right? Okay. Yeah. You guys have any questions on init parameter, context parameter, or filters, or is all good?
Hi Arun,
Yeah.
I had a question on the init parameter. I was wondering, in the real web applications, where are they deployed? How are they used?
See, init parameters is something like, suppose you want a servlet which need to establish a connection with a database. So instead of writing the parameters in the, it means when you want to establish a connection with the database, what you do, you load a driver and establish a connection, right?
Right.
Then you need a URL, username, and password. So instead of hard coding them in the Java program itself, you send them as initialization parameters.
Oh, okay.
So that's the same with the context parameters. If you want those parameters to be available for more than servlets, more than one servlet, it's going to be a context parameter. Otherwise, it's going to be a unique parameter.
Okay.
So mostly these kind of things, because we cannot hard code these values like database URL and database driver, username, password. These cannot be hard coded inside a Java program. So what we do is, with the help of XML document, we pass it, because when we modify XML document, we just need to restart the application. Whereas if you modify a Java program, you need to recompile your Java program. So that's going to be a pain. So we use XML, and through XML we pass those initialization parameters.
Okay.
Hey, exception is completely different from filter, right? What we are doing with the help of filter, exception is completely different, because exception, now what yesterday I demonstrated exception. Exceptions are those which occurs at runtime, which I cannot figure out. Understood? So with my experience, I know that there is a possibility of arithmetic exception, there is a possibility of number format exception, but I don't know where they're gonna occur. So in case if they occur, I directed them yesterday. In case if any exception occurs, I'm directing it here with the help of error page tag. You can write whatever. Instead you can write one particular one. Instead of this you can write one particular one, saying it as, hey, if any exception occurs, why don't you direct it to this error servlet? But what is filter? See, you are just validating the data. You are just validating the data, but exception is not about validating the data, right? So with the help of exception, with the help of filters, what you can do is you can do a lot of work, pre-processing work, because we know that servlet object is created only once, and one object serves multiple requests. Suppose there are 30 clients, there won't be 30 servlet objects, there will be only one servlet object attending 30 customers. Now imagine if these 30 customers are submitting invalid requests, what is the point in servlet processing them every time? So what we did is we introduced a filter in between the servlet and the request. Now your filter will check whether it is a valid request or invalid request. If it is an invalid request, your filter don't allow the request to go to servlet. It redirects it back. It throws back to the client saying that, hey, you have a problem with the data. That's how filter does. So we cannot compare the filter and the exception. There are two different things. Just give me a minute. This guy had a problem. Okay, just give me a minute. So this was actually the session. Let me try to give him a link again. Yeah, you can go ahead with any questions if you have. May not be the concepts which we just discussed right away. It can be anything before that too. That's what I said, right? Now, in case your question was valid. If JavaScript is already validating the data, then why do we need filters? JavaScript is on the browser side. JavaScript happens on the browser side, but I demonstrated one thing for you here. Click, and if you think that JavaScript is going to validate the data, if somebody does this, right? So I'm not saying that okay people do it wantedly, but of course when somebody is registering with us, there may be a fake registration, and they just want to do it. Okay, it was show advanced setting I said, then there was show advanced settings, content setting. You see here, the JavaScript is disabled. Now, if it is disabled, is your JavaScript works on the browser? No. If it is disabled on the browser, then what happens? Then there should be somebody to validate the data. But we cannot rely on we can also rely on servlet to validate. There are two validations, client-side validation, server-side validation. Client-side validation, we do it with what? With the help of JavaScript. The server-side validations, you should do it with a Java program only. Right. So client-side validations can be done using JavaScript. Server-side validations need to be done using a Java program. But instead of using servlet, instead of doing the validations on the servlet, instead of doing the validations on the servlet, we do the validations on the filter, so that to save the burden on the servlet. Because as I told you that there is only one servlet object for attending multiple requests, and you cannot disturb the performance of the servlet by sending the invalid data. So they introduced a filter. It will filter the request before sending it to the servlet, so that the performance of the servlet is good, right? Means it can attend only the genuine request, not the invalid request. Okay, any other question? All right then. Okay. Yes.
Arun, I had a question about the Tomcat web server. I recently installed it and was trying to view the web.xml file, and I can only view it in the tree form. I cannot view the source code of the web.xml file. So, how to do that?
Basically, there are two options here, right? This is what you are saying,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
Beside that, there is a source tab.
Okay. Let me see. No, it's actually clicked on the. Oh, now I see it. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Right. So let's do the next part. It's how do we integrate JDBC and a servlets. Right. So I just want to develop dynamic web project where I'll say what we call it as, yeah, CRUD operation. Create, retry, update, delete operation. Create, retry, update, delete operation. Now what I want to do is, you remember that, okay, here I take this first.html. Then I would like to define HTML. Let's say insert.html. Then I say delete.html. Then I say get.html. Then I say getAll.html. Now for the insert.html, I already designed the HTML, so I just use the same one. Then I change it here, the register servlet to insert servlet. Now what do I need for deleting? I say delete servlet. To delete a record, you need a username because username is unique here. Input type equals text, name equals username. One need to be consistent when you start using this single quotes or double quotes. Input type equal to text, name equal to username. Then I'll go with the submit button. Then I say delete. Then I go with get.html. I want to retrieve a single record. Then to delete a record also we need to pass the unique identifier. Username will be the unique identifier. To get a record. To get a record we need to pass the ID and get the details. Now comes next is get all. Now for get all you don't need to pass any arguments because anyhow you need all the parameters. So just you need a button. Says get all. So you have 4 HTML pages. Then what I can do, I need to develop the control, the rest of the things. New servlet, but I use a package. I call them as a controller. Then I write insert servlet. Then I write insert servlet. Similarly, I can have delete servlet. Get servlet. Get all servlet. Okay, so you have these servlets. So when somebody clicks on the submit button of the HTML, that reaches these servlets. That reaches these servlets. Okay. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to use servlets and JDBC together. I'm trying to use servlets and JDBC together. So I have some HTMLs. A HTML to insert a data, a HTML to delete a record, a HTML to get a record, and a HTML to get all the records. So I have 4 HTMLs to insert, delete, retrieve all. For every corresponding HTML, there is a servlet. For every corresponding HTML, there is a servlet, and it is defined inside a package called controller. So for insert HTML, you have an insert servlet. For delete HTML, delete servlet. For get. For get all. Now, what next? Let me create other packages. Connection. BAO. Now when I open my insert.html, I'll understand how many fields I have. Oh, I got a first name, last name, username, password, gender, date of birth, mobile number, alternate email address, optional photo. Then here we go, SQL plus. I'm using Oracle database. I'm logging into the database. Then I create a table. Then I say, just say user, I pivot user. Then what is the first thing? I need a first name. So you can specify whatever you want to specify, this number of characters for first name. You want to say last name. Oh, you got a first name, you got a last name. Then you got a first name, you got a last name. What is the other one we have here? Yeah. Username and a password, right? You have a username. First name, last name, username, password. You got gender. then date of birth, and what do you have? Mobile number, then alt email, then what else you have? Photo. For storing the images or any, for storing the images we have a data type called blob. For storing the images we have a data type called blob. For storing a text files, we have a data type called clock. To store text files, we have a data type called clock. To store text files, we have a data type called clock. To store images, we have a data type called clock. To store images, we have a data type called blob. To store text files, we have a data type called clock. Any text file clock or any image file, we use data type called blob. So, but I don't want to use blob because normally they don't store images into a database. They don't store images into a database. Instead, they store the image address or file address. They don't store files into the database. They don't store files into the database. Instead, okay, I'm sorry. Fine. Okay. They store what? Address into the database. Instead of the image, they store image address into a database. Okay. Now, what should be the unique here? Username. So, alter table name, add unique username, table alter. So you have a table. I just keep this for your information. You have a table. Then you also add a unique constraint on a username. Now what? I just go to the servlet program which I did earlier. Perfect. So what happens when I click on that insert button? It comes to the insert servlet. Now in this servlet I am reading the first name, last name, username, password, gender. Then you have a date of birth, you got a mobile number and email address. I will discuss about the photo later. Right? I'll discuss about the photo later. That is the image later. Now what all I have? I have a connection package, I have a DAO package. When I do the right click, then I say interface, or I'm creating a package. Let's say DTO. So in this, I create a class. What we call it as? I'll say user is a class. Now in this user class, I declare private string, first name, last name, username, password, mobile number, first name, last name, username, password, mobile number. And what do we have? Yeah, this is the email address. Okay, first name, last name, username, password, mobile number, email address, and you have a gender. Okay, you also have a photo. The photo is nothing but your photo address. Then right click, source, getters and setters. Perfect. Right? And you can also have constructor if you wanna have constructor using a field. Right? Yes. This is all good. This is all good so far. Let me go back to the insert servlet. So you have the data ready here. When you click on the submit button, you get all this data. Now this all data I will store into a user object. I'll store into a user object. From where I got this. Okay, yeah, here. User details. Import. Yeah, this seems to be perfect. Then I'm creating an object for a user. You have a first name, last name, password, mobile number, email address. Then you don't have a photo. So here I pass null for time being because I don't have a photo with me. I'll come back to that part later, the photo part. So your user object is ready. Then right click. I'll create a class and let me call it as a user DAO. Now in this user DAO, I will keep adding all those things. Public int insert, public int insert, it takes a user argument. The same stuff what we did there in the JDBC. So you have insert method. So similarly you can add delete method. To delete a record you don't need the user object, you just need a username. Next is to get a record, and to get a record you don't need the user object, you again need a username, the unique username. Then you have one more, get all. You don't need an argument for get all because you need to get all the records. And it's not an individual object now, it's going to be an array list of objects. Here also return user list. Now this is what you have. You have a DTO, you have a DAO, and you can have a connection. You can write a database connection class. It's done. Then what you can do, ignoring the photo, you can do the rest of the operations, right? You know how to insert a record, you know how to delete a record, you know how to read a record, you know how to read all the records. So you can put that logic into the user DAO. So what you do here in the insert servlet now. Now when you go back to your controller package, you have an insert servlet. Now here, create a user DAO object. Now on this user DAO object, call the insert method and pass the user object. And that returns an integer value. Now basing on that integer value, the status not equal to 0, response dot get writer dot println, you can give a message registered successfully, else you can give a message fails to register. That's it. Right? Yeah. Any questions on what I discussed so far? Or is it clear? Because it's more or less what we did in JDBC. The same thing we just plugged in here. The same thing we just plugged in here. We're not doing anything new. You know how to load a driver. You know how to establish a connection. You know how to insert, update, delete, withdraw. The only thing is, instead of calling from the main method, now you are calling from a servlet. Instead of calling from the main method, you are calling it from a servlet. That's it. Okay. I can do it few things for you, but I don't want to write everything from scratch. Let's go back to the project. It was that Java SE training, then source, then JDBC, then database connection. Let me obtain this connection. Perfect. I have a connection now. Okay. And here I will be loading a driver and pick up the other one. And one more thing is, you need to do that build path, right? What I mean is here. You need to do the build path. But it is a web application. So it is a web application. So you don't be doing the build path now. You need to refer to Oracle jar file, right? You won't be doing it now. The reason being, why you won't be doing it? Because it's not a standalone application, it's a web application. So you need to get that jar file. I know it is installed in the C drive Oracle, Oracle XC, APP, Oracle, product, endpoint, server, When you have a JDBC, you have a lib, then you have the jar file. Copy the jar file and focus here. You have a WebINF, you have a lib folder. Now into the lib folder you need to put the jar file. Otherwise you won't be able to connect to a database. So add that jar file to this lib folder and your job is done. Add that jar file to the lib folder, your job is done. You will be able to connect to the databases now. So I have written a database connection. Let me do user DAO also. I go there to the program source d.15.jdbc, then I go DAO program. I pick that insert method. DAO, I have an insert method. Then it's user. Database connection dot get connection. Now the table is this underscore user. How many first name, last name, username, password. Let me check what I have. First name, last name, username, password, gender. First name, last name, username, password, gender, date of birth, mobile number, email address. So everything is a string. So I say here get the first name, get the last name. This is for the username, password, gender. Username, password, gender. 3, 4, 5. Eight. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have after gender, date of birth, mobile number, alternate email, photo. Gender, then you have your date of birth. I think I forgot here. Let me go back and add it. DTO. Okay, I missed out a lot of things. So wait, the date of birth. Then I need a getters and setters to it. Right click source, getters and setters. So you have your date of birth. get the date of birth, the sixth column, then string, check mobile number, I think, mobile number, then the next is email address, then again the last one, it's null, I'm passing, because there is no image now. So first name, last name, username, password, date of birth, mobile number, alternate email address, then image 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, it should be 9, right? Okay. First name, last name, username, password, gender, date of birth. Perfect. This is done. Now here, after mobile number, it was supposed to be what? No. Username, password, date of birth, string, 1, 2, 3, 4, then date. Let me look at the constructor. First name, last name, username, password, date of birth. Okay. First name, last name, username, password, date of birth. First name, last name, username. Yeah, it was correct. Also, date of birth, mobile number, email address, gender. Okay. There is no photo, so I'm happy. What's wrong with this? Four strings followed by a date. 1, 2, 3, 4 strings followed by a date of birth. Then while inserting into the database, you need a SQL date. Java.sql.date. I'm converting the UT date into SQL date, which we discussed earlier also. It's done. Now let me try to run the application with insert.html. Right click, run as, run on server. Run on server. Click on the next and click on the finish. Restart server. Got your first name. Got your last name. Username. Password. Got your gender. mobile number, got your email address. There is no photo. Registered successfully. Yeah, there is a record. Right. So the registration has happened successfully. Now what is left for you people is complete the rest of the things. You have an insert method. You can do delete, get all. You already know this how to do because we did JDBC earlier. Now you can use the delete servlet, get servlet and get all servlet to complete the rest. Right. So any questions for me? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, if the class is done, I would like you to take a look at the Tomcat server that I'm running. I'm having some problems with it.
Okay, just give me a minute. Let me check with others. Guys, you have any questions? Sure, I'll talk to Shiva because I have wrote to him. Right, I was expecting him to forward already all the recordings. I'll check with him today and I'll ensure that you get access. You get them by today. All right, okay. If no questions, recording part, I'll talk to Shiva and try to close it today. And if anything other than that, if you have any questions, we'll discuss. Otherwise, we'll stop here. And I expect you to guys to complete this activity. I finished one insert. Then what is pending is delete, get and get all. So you can try your hands and you can become comfortable with it. All right. If no questions, thank you everybody. Catch you in the next session. Oh, you have a question, Suman? Yeah. Okay. Just give me a minute. Yeah. You can go ahead. I unmuted you. You can talk. Your voice is not audible. Okay.